So the range man shot strangers on the Long Island Railroad. It provided a wake-up call for many who thought they were insulated. USA Today featured a 22-page masterpiece of work on guns and violence. When CNN asked the editor, why the 22 pages? Why now? He pointed to the Long Island Railroad incident. Even politicians responded and gun control legislation finally passed. But in New York City last year alone, nearly 400 blacks under 21 killed each other. Self-hate recycled into pain, pain recycled into hate. The most vulnerable lash out at each other violently, socially conditioned acceptance with the least consequence. What was once a crisis, a problem, has turned into a condition. Last year in Washington, D.C., a 4-year-old girl, in the springtime of possibility, really early in the morning, was killed while watching a football game sitting on her mother's knee. Her mother, only 20, never knew her father. He was killed when she was 3. Little girl's mother died last year at 37. Left her with 3 siblings to raise, 5 living in one room. The little girl's father could not come to the funeral. He's in the penitentiary because he shot a 4-year-old. Pain recycled. We cannot adjust to this condition. We cannot accept it. It's violent. It's wrong. It must stop. Violence, particularly black on black violence, is not a secret. It's public knowledge. Nearly half of all murder victims are black. Will blacks kill each other annually than were killed in the entire history of lynchings. Violence, it is now in our language. Kill them, crush them. It's in our music, our movies, our culture. It is settling disproportionately on the poor, on African Americans. We must break this cycle. Remember, those young people with their angry lyrics who call themselves gangsters are not really gangsters. They too are our children, victims as well as purveyors of our violent culture. These are our children. We must challenge the perpetrators of this violence to stop the madness. The victims must rise up and demand the change. Yes, violence is pervasive in America. Violence is up 250% among whites. Our government is the leading source of arms in the world. The most powerful weapons our young men and women face abroad are those that we sold or gave away. Our CIA is entangled in guns and drugs. Too often police, upon whom we rely, are caught up in the drug rings they're supposed to police, and thus diminish moral authority. If it is so pervasive, some ask, why should the black community accept the burden so directly? Surely this crisis is not our cross to bear alone. Let me make the case. Yes, the victims of oppression bear the heaviest burden, often with the least nutrition. The struggle for survival and civil rights is always required that those who are farthest behind run faster, get up earlier, work harder, think better than those who had a head start. To survive, we cannot mirror nor imitate the worst of society. We must transform society, not accept it. A common interpretation of the scripture is, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. That's bad exegesis. It is our burden to transform Rome, not to adjust it. We cannot make progress without moral authority. We must not accept our nation's violence. We must challenge the nation to match our dignity. Like Jesus, Martin, and Mandela, we must use the stripe on our bodies to be sources of healing and hope, not hurt and hate. We must act and regain the moral offensive and set the moral priorities for the entire country. In any struggle, strength must be found in the will of the victimized, in their disciplined behavior and faith in change. The Bible says, and I believe it to be right, we shall be transformed by the renewal of our minds. Slavery was not ended by slave masters. They never retired. The enslaved had to change their minds. Segregators and colonizers never retired. The segregated and the colonized must be transformed by the renewal of their minds. When we fought segregation, the oppressed had to turn to each other, not on each other, to confront the oppressor. I need to say that one more. When we were under segregation, the oppressed had to turn to each other, not on each other, to confront the oppressor. If during the Montgomery bus boycott, we recorded a weekly murder as we shared rides at the bus stop, neighbors would have been afraid to ride with one another. If we were shooting at each other over drugs, issues, and Selma, it would have undercut the struggle. The violence of Bill Cosby would have been rationalized. The violence of George Wallace would have been rationalized. Our segregation would have seemed, our struggle would have seemed less morally strong, and they would have seemed less repugnant. We did not allow their bigotry and their violence to turn us against one another. We sought to erect a chin bar of dignity that they could not reach. We exposed our humanity and their immorality, and we won. We were not accepting, we were defiant, but we did not turn on each other. We broke unjust laws, filled southern jails, faced clubs and dogs to challenge America to do right. I went to jail July 17, 1960 in Greenville, South Carolina, trying to use a library. The jail in Greensboro, North Carolina, trying to use a restaurant. In Chicago, trying to demand affirmative action. We have been defiant. Fratricide is no threat to the status quo. If the oppressed descend into self-destruction, the oppressor will permit it and even encourage it and pay for it. They will give us free ropes. So we must change our ways first. Significant change is always born in hope and in the will of the oppressed. We must focus our defiance and not accept our degradation. We must put before the nation our agenda. We must not satisfy the vulgar appetite of our enemies by referring to our own people as niggers and bitches and whores. Rap for the revolution. Sound the trumpet. Be the town crier for justice. Stomp out the rhythm of our pain. Do not confuse self-degradation with defiance. Malcolm, Medgar, Martin, and Mandela would not do this to our people. Fannie Lou Hamer, Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, and Mary McLeod Bethune, Rosa Parks, and Shirley Chisholm would not stand for it. So we, the most besieged and beleaguered, must take the lead to change the nation's behavior and its values. Yes, there must be new effective government policies and priorities, but our demand to change. Our ability to lead comes not from our numbers. We are a minority in numbers. Not from our dollars. Not from our wealth. Nor our dollars. It comes from our dignity. The moral rightness of the man for equal protection under the law. The change is to come. It must come from the bottom up, not top down. Dr. King said that the only way to get someone off of your back is to stand up. Don't wait for change. Stand up and make it and take it. The change is to come. The victims of violence, the black community, must stand up. This forum is a beginning, not an end. Consider across the country. We want to arouse a movement to demilitarize our streets, stop the violence, and save our children. For years, good ideas and committed individuals have stood like frogs in the wind against the gale of violence. Now we want to weave these stripes and these strips of straw into a basket of strength and capacity to reach out and reclaim the children. That's why the ex-offenders and the present offenders and the preachers and the judges and the politicians, if they sit in a common room, we must go behind the ground. Parents can do at least 5 basic things. Take your child to school. Meet your child's teacher. Exchange home numbers. Teachers teach children differently when they know the parents. Children behave different when parents and teachers know each other. Turn the TV off for at least 3 hours a night. That's why we're the best on earth at basketball and football, because we work at it. Pick up your child's report cards every 9 weeks. Build that bridge between bedroom and classroom. Students can stand up by breaking the code of silence, organizing a counterculture movement against those who threaten their brothers and sisters with drugs, guns, greed, and violence. We must protect their anonymity, even as we urge them to assert their dignity. Judges and preachers in their black robes can stand up together. We will challenge 100 churches to mentor at least 10 troubled young people each. Spread this over 100 cities. There will be 100,000 young men and women that might find alternatives to homelessness, despair, and unnecessary incarceration. Black colleges can stand up by taking the lead to turn jails, the wastelands and warehouse young into universities. Act so that the young in jail leave with different skills and hopes than when they came in. Those in jail are 92% functionally illiterate. While in jail, there must be a massive movement to provide literacy and trade skills, marketable skills, computer learning, and esteem, a way to cut recidivism. We don't need boot camps to sculpt muscles and learn marching. We need knowledge and skill and discipline to compete. Together, if we stand up, we can build a mighty movement to reclaim our streets, to save our children, to end the violence. Just by shifting energy, we can begin to shift the budget. Stop the rise in crime and violence. We can shift billions from punishment and repair to development and hope. And by shifting our energy, we can regain a moral offensive and challenge society to change. Welfare reform with no budget for training or jobs for the trained is not the answer. Congresswoman Maxine Waters has a plan. The youth 17 to 30, just beyond their teenage years. At the peak of their energy, these young men, young women just need some training and some job and some hope. The draconian Senate bill is an expensive non-remedy. Their reaction, not remedies. It is morally wrong and cost inefficient to cut the HUD budget in 1994 by $4 billion. Cut the HUD budget in 1994 by $4 billion and invest almost the same amount in building $100,000 condominium jail cells. That's immoral and cost inefficient. Mandatory sentences that are discriminatory are not the answer. For example, if a youth has 5 grams of crack cocaine, 5 sweet and low sugar bags of crack cocaine, 5 years automatic sentence. One is found with 100 times more powder cocaine. They're eligible for probation. And thus the little muse go to jail kingpins keep dealing between high office and across the border. We need relief and remedies born of hope, not reactions born of fear and expediency. But change it must. We know the violence brought by drugs and guns, but there is another violence just as pervasive and just as deadly. As we turn to each other and not on each other, stop the killing and remove the drugs, we'll free our energy, demand an end to the structured violence that is just as deadly as street violence. A gunshot may cripple an innocent child for life, but so does malnutrition. Drugs can destroy brains and foreclose the future, but so does savage inequality in education that traps some to Yale and some to jail. 4 years, a diploma, a degree, object course in math, a physics, a science. In wartime, cities are leveled by bombs, but our neighborhoods are bombed out in peacetime. And the embargo is an act of war what strangles an economy and puts misery on the people. Redlining of neighborhoods is a similar violence, but cuts the flow of capital that's vital to any economy. The very structure of our abandoned cities, redlining banks, collapsing schools, fleeing jobs, rusting infrastructure, is structured, institutionalized violence. Plants close, jobs leave, tax base eroded, children idle, restless, school system traumatized, mamas overburdened, daddies run away, jail cells expanding. No. Welfare reform must give way to economic reform. A jail bill must give way to a school bill and a job bill. We must put America back to work. When President Clinton spoke in Memphis, observed that Dr. King's heart would be broken to the present level of self-destruction. He was correct. The President was eloquent about the crisis. He gave us the whereas's. Whereas there are problems, whereas there is pain, whereas there's self-destruction, whereas there is killing. But we need the President to go to the level of therefore. If the President will reach and preach, let him preach on the great defining issue of race, calling upon our nation to resume its historic struggle toward creating equal protection under the law. Then let him use his power not simply to preach, but to set priorities in our nation's interest. Let him go from whereas to therefore. Therefore, I appoint a credible Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights. Therefore, a credible chair for the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission. Therefore, a credible head of the Office of Contract Compliance. Therefore, I announce a civil rights policy and invigorate the civil rights agencies so dispirited over the last decade of retreat. The President can say equal rights. Therefore, I will put the power of my office behind statehood to the District of Columbia. Therefore, I will fulfill the covenant made during my campaign to invest $20 billion a year in rebuilding our cities and putting people back to work. Therefore, I will honor my covenant by ensuring that every child has a healthy start and a childhood, by ending the savage inequality that marks our increasingly segregated schools, by providing every child who earns the chance to go to college. Therefore, I am launching a development plan to encourage teachers, police and firemen, and women to move into the areas of greatest need. We should offer them subsidized mortgages rather than have another 100,000 police. Let's organize more policing of the 100,000 we already got. For example, in those areas called development zones or enterprise zones, offer those police, those firemen, those teachers who work in the city but live in the suburbs, who get their nectar from the tree in the city and drop their pollen on the other side of town, provide for those teachers, those professionals who should be our children's neighbors and role models, provide them 30-year loans at 4% government secured, create economic incentives to rebuild America inside out. Therefore, I'm launching an urban development plan modeled on the plans we developed for the Polish people. The Polish American Development Plan, a law that's just 3 years old, will offer the Polish people $240 million. The Hungarians, $60 million. To offer them 40-year loan at 0.75%. First payment due in 10 years. Therefore, if we can rebuild Poland and help Russia and rebuild Europe and Japan, and it's the right thing to do, surely we can rebuild our own cities and stop the violence and save the children, therefore. But where the president might be asked, where will the money come from? We have a deficit. Our budget law puts a cap on spending, but don't stop there. We have the money. Instead of speculating about what Dr. King might have said were he alive today, the president might sensibly look at what Dr. King did say when he was here. What did he say? What did he say? He marched on Washington to demand payment on the promissory note that had bounced, marked insufficient funds. And that was not good enough, he said. This is a rich nation. We have the money. A nation, he said, that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift, approaching spiritual death. This year, my friend, 4 years after the fall of the Berlin Wall, the U.S. still is spending $274 billion on its military. The Russians will spend less than $50 billion. Germany is united, but we paid to keep over 300,000 troops and dependents in Germany looking for something to do. If you don't count, y'all hear me, if you don't count our closest allies in NATO and Japan, the U.S. alone is spending 20% more than the rest of the entire world combined on this military. We're still defending ourselves from Cuba. An economic war, no ideological threat, no military threat, just looking for something to do. Let us decide that a safe measure of our security is to spend only as much as the rest of the world combined. Let us decide today to spend the same amount of money on the military as the rest of the world combined. That would free up over $50 billion a year to reinvest in this country. Oh, we have the money. We've done the research. Therefore, we need a change.
Jesse Jackson adding his powerful and effective voice to efforts within the African American communities of the United States to become ever more active in addressing the problems associated with black-on-black violence, problems such as gangs.